was at the Tanfern racetrack near San Bruno. I could ride over there to talk to him. I grabbed a taxi cab and told the driver where I wanted to go. I thought about talking with him on our way. I love this job, he told me as we turned the corner of Polk and Bush Streets. Used to work at a plant across the bay with my two brothers. You know how boring that gets? Bang this, push that, what a life. We weren't made for factories. Sure, they get paid more, they're part of the union, they have good pensions, they can't beat this, he said, revving his engine. Such freedom. We spoke about his love of the open road until we reached my destination. Tanforan Racetrack had reopened the previous year with the help of millionaire Adolf Spreckles and some associates, one of whom was stable. Today, no races were ongoing, and the sheer size of the empty grounds and the grandstands were impressive. I hopped the locked turnstile and wandered the grandstands and some of the grounds, but all my searching turned up nothing and nobody, not even stable. I returned nearer the entrance to search for more clues. Empty boxes were thrown next to the old betting house. I spent some time rummaging through them, but found nothing of interest. Wooden slats bordered the window of the old betting house. The Walker Otis measure of 1909 prohibited gambling on horses, which meant most racetracks shuttered, including the Tanforan. But Stable and a few other investors reopened the track the previous year, claiming to operate without taking bets. I removed the trash bin's lid to let my hands play with something while my thoughts had time to form. But peering in, I saw the biggest break in the case thus far. An automatic pistol, .45 caliber, was right on top of the pile. I reached in to get a closer look. A throat cleared behind me. I pocketed the weapon quickly, then turned around to Stable's smug grin.
Have you come to watch the horses? He asked. Rumour says that running through fire will be the victor, though at times it can be dangerous to put stock in rumours.
Redstone Stable wasn't in his barber shop. Ray Carter told me something interesting, I put to him. He says you got a wire from somebody and rushed out, leaving him mid-trim. For the first time, I saw Stable frown.
Well, business and pleasure sometimes mix, Miss Malone. Yes, I was telephoned for a maintenance issue, but that's now all sorted.
I'd found a .45 caliber gun in the trash bin. It was the type most gangsters used. I found an automatic in your trash bin. This .45 is a gangster caliber. What are the chances it's the same one that killed Green? Stable frowned again. I was beginning to like his frowns. So it seems to me, I continued, that your boys found the murder weapon in the trash, then called you around to see what to do about it.
Yes, he admitted. I was telephoned to look at the weapon. We were about to phone the police about it when I noticed you wandering the grounds.
Why were you so interested in the Green case, and why is this gun here? He sighed.
Do you remember, Miss Malone, that Connor Green had already attempted to frame me? Once I had learned of his death, I thought that whoever had killed him would also try to blame me. I invited Carter for a trim in exchange for information about the murder, and I told my associates to watch for anything suspicious at the racetrack. As soon as the gun was found, they telephoned me, and here we are.
So you still won't admit to the murder? I pushed him.
Think what you want, Miss Malone. I had no reason to kill Connor Green, and if you think otherwise, you were just playing into the game set up by the real killer.
That was the story Stable was sticking with. Still, I was much further along than I had been, and that gave me reason to smile. How did you know my name? I questioned. He smiled again. He apparently liked smiling when he was pleased with himself,
Miss Malone, that is an interesting answer, but interesting answers are for people who interest me, and you were quite lifeless. No, you will not get further down this road.
I brought up the furniture in his barber shop. Elegant trappings for a barber. Math was never my strong subject, but I can't see a barber making enough for all of it. He smiled.
Yes, I have other methods of procuring wealth, but I do not engage in illicit activities, if that is your implication.
Did you know that Green is lying about his Oakland past? I asked Stable. Stable raised his eyebrows.
Well, you are volunteering quite interesting information. I did not know that, but I thank you for it.
I told him that Connor Green was found near the Tin Spoon, the coroner reporting his time of death around midnight.
That's a late hour, Stable said. Miss Malone, I'm always fast asleep in my bed at that time of night.
So, nobody was there with you?
No, I was alone.
In response to my raised eyebrow, he continued,
I would never lie to you, Miss Malone. Of course, it would just be as difficult for you to disprove my story as it would be for me to prove it. And we live in a civilized nation that requires your proof, not mine.
Stable might have had the opportunity to kill Green, but I'd have to first place him concretely.
I assure you, he said, I was at home asleep at that time.
Hey, well, I don't have any evidence to the contrary, so I let his statement slide just then and asked about something else. Hey, I think that's it for now. I'd first snuck into the racetrack by jumping the locked turnstile, which had been easy enough. I could leave the same way. Okay, so there's some stuff I wanted to ask Ella at the Tin Spoon. Ella Smith was still fidgeting with the playing cards. I cleared my throat and she stopped fiddling with the cards to look my way. According to Carter, the Tin Spoon's backing singer Ella Smith throws herself at Tiny Paul. Ray Carter tells me that you and Tiny Paul are close, I said. Is that true, Miss Smith? Smith squinted at me hotly, then let out a sigh.
Okay, he's right, she blurted. I'm in love with Paul, that's no crime.
It was obvious she'd wanted to hide the relationship. If the two of them ever broke it off, her career would be doomed. I empathised with her. The heart never plays fair. This won't get out on my account, I promised. But you have to tell me Tiny Paul's whereabouts. She sighed and gave me the address of a Pacific Heights apartment building.
He lives in a penthouse on the top floor. Just don't tell him I told you.
I thanked her for Paul's address and changed the subject. Okay, that's all I needed to follow up on here. So let's leave and go to Tiny Paul's apartment. Tiny Paul was in his Pacific Heights penthouse. If I had any questions for him, I could go there. I flagged a taxi cab and was on my way. I thought about chatting with the driver to pass the time. When the driver turned to ask where I wanted to go, I saw his striking blue eyes looked years younger than the greying temples beneath his wool cap. I was curious about his history. I struck up a conversation which led to his past life.
Ever hear of the Suicide Club?
He asked. I admitted I hadn't.
Bob the Goat coined that phrase. Poor guy ate a runway for his last meal.
War pilots, I asked.
Half right. We was mail carried. Uncle Sam was training us for the military. Shame so few made it.
I asked why he'd left.
Rumours said the average pilot lasted 900 hours. Likely not far off. Flying with no lights, no emergency landing, barely a weather report, never a parachute. What do they expect?
Glad you're driving a taxi cab now? I asked as we pulled up to my destination.
My wife is, but I miss flying every day.
He turned to tip his cap and I saw the sparkle in his eyes. I thanked him for the ride and left the car. Paul's building was still new, built only a few years earlier, but it was already a beacon of Pacific Heights, tall and proud above its surroundings. Its crisp, vanilla interior was accented with gold, and its elevator was run with an equally immaculate operator. I rode it to the top floor bungalow that belonged to Tiny Paul. Paul's light brown shoes were discarded beside the couch he lay on. A wrapped bouquet of flowers lay on the table. They were a vibrant yellow. They reminded me of flowers I'd seen earlier, but I couldn't place them at that moment. The couch and chairs had patterned olive-coloured cushions. Their arms and legs were a gaudy shade of gold, matching the gold of the tables. A cluster of brown glass bottles were on the far table. They were empty. The oil paintings that hung on the wall had no particular theme. One had roses, another showed a landscape, but each of their frames was ornately carved from a fine wood. Tiny Paul was sprawled across his Chesterfield. Tiny Paul was sprawled across his Chesterfield, smelling of rubbing alcohol. I said hello. It took a century, but his eyes eventually climbed to meet mine, and he slurred a greeting. I figured a drunk Tiny Paul could be more honest. I thought it was a good time to grill him. Green had led on a new rumming scheme, a connection from Vancouver. He'd given a sample to Tiny Paul, the gangster who ran the Tin Spoon speakeasy for Jerry Ferry. They'd agreed to buy in for more. So, you gave Green the dough? I asked.
That's right, he said. We gave him the cash to get the supply going.
And then he was going to run out on you? He nodded.
So you know the game.
You did too, I replied, surprise evidence in my voice.
Early this morning, he said, I went to, well, you don't need to know where.
Even inebriated, Tiny Paul knew enough to not give away any family secrets.
Anyhow, it's enough to tell you this. Green was pulling the bait and switch. He wanted to take our money and get out of the city. He had no plan to sell us any of the stuff. So yeah, I'm glad he got what was coming to him. But no,
he extended the last letter.
I'm not the one that plucked him.
As much as Paul claimed to not be responsible, I wondered how much I could trust the word of a gangster. At least his drunken speech had given me a possible motive. Mrs. Green was a torch singer at the Tin Spoon, where she was known as Lil Fanny. Green's wife is a torcher at the Tin Spoon, I asked. Paul smiled.
With the pipe she's got built into that body, she's the reason most fellas come back to the joint.
I know a girl who likes flowers like the ones on your table, I said to him. Called Green, but she likes yellow flowers. How do you figure that? I don't think he liked the way it was figured. He stared at me, eyes ablaze. That told me all I needed to. Tiny Paul was Fanny Green's admirer.
What are you saying, Malone?
Just asking questions, I said to him. A detective has to cover all her leads. Paul took a heavy sigh, but in his drunken state, he didn't do much more. I moved to other questions. Green was killed around midnight, I told him. Do you remember anything from then?
After the jazz stopped playing at 10, I went up to the pool room to shoot. I think the whole band came in. We played cards until early in the morning.
So you were in the Tin Spoon all night, I asked.
After 10, he nodded, though I did leave before then. I met with Redstone Stable at 9 o'clock, then around 5 in the morning. It seemed like he hadn't slept much.
You met with Stable, I asked. Why?
I ain't telling you that, sister.
Then why should I believe you at all?
Believe what you want, he snorted. I was in the pool hole when Green was shot.
I don't think I have evidence to the contrary. I didn't challenge him on that point. I told Paul that Green had been killed with a large automatic. He replied sardonically,
What is our country coming to? So many people owning firearms. Tisk, tisk.
Alice Smith tells me that most of your regulars are packing heat. Paul frowned.
If you'd like to put me on the stand for crimes my patrons commit, I don't think I'd have any chance of beating the rap. But I don't control what my guests do, Malone.
Okay, I think that's everything. I decided to leave him be. I could always return with further questions. But we're going back to the racetrack because Stable said he was asleep, but he wasn't asleep. Stable was still milling about 10 for his entrance. I could pump him for more information. Stable smiled at me as I approached him, but I didn't think he was all that happy to see me. Tiny Paul tells me that you two met last night, I put to Stable, and then you met again early this morning. He says you look ragged. Not much sleep then?
Very well, Stable sighed. I do admit that I spent yesterday searching for information on this case, and that perhaps the search bled into this morning. In my situation, would you not also look for clues against Green, the man who had accused you of blackmail?
I must have beamed at him, armed now with the knowledge that Stable had no alibi the previous night.
However, he continued, in my search to clear my name, I did find a fact that might interest you. A fact that I had kept to myself, but if Paul wishes to lay claim to my feet, I might as well tell you.
I looked at him quizzically.
The Tin Spoon has a back exit. Patrons likely have no suspicion of it, but I'm certain many of the staff know. They could enter and leave without anyone noticing.
And how do you know this? I asked.
Never mind how I came about the information. Just be thankful I'm giving it to you. If you do not believe me, I encourage you to ask others about it.
That was a peculiar development. I noted it and continued my questioning. That's all I have for now. Okay. I have a source that tells me there's a back exit to the Tin Spoon, I said. Know anything about it?
Back exit? No, I'm afraid I never heard such a thing.
Okay, so he doesn't know anything about the back exit, but maybe Ella does. throat and she stopped fiddling with the cards to look my way. Okay, Ella, tell me about this back exit. I have a source that says there's a back exit at the Tin Spoon. What do you know about it? Alice Smith nodded. Yes, we do have one. It's behind the women's changing rooms. I can't imagine any of the men know about it. They would never be able to get back there without causing a riot. But the girls use it whenever we need to slip away from customers who are, she paused, too eager. So, there's a back exit to the Tin Spoon that only the women know about. That's right, she said. Okay, so the men don't know. Hey, there's a couple more things I wanted to ask Tony Paul now that I think about it, so let's go back. A hat hung from the rack nailed to the back wall, as did an empty gun holster. Okay. Okay, so, do you know anything about this back exit? I mean, it's your thing, you should know. But still. Stable tells me there's a back exit to your joint, I put to him. Might you have escaped that way last night?
Back exit? Paul asked. I don't know what medicine Stable is using, or what medicine he should be using, but I don't know of any back exits to the Tin Spoon.
However long I pressed him, Paul wouldn't admit there was any way out of the Tin Spoon beyond the front door. Okay. Ella Smith tells me that you two are lovers, I put to him. He let out a low grumble. Smith was beautiful, but she was Chinese, and Paul wouldn't sit well if the rumours swirled around the two of them. Paul, I pressed, is she lying to me? Paul sighed with a no, and followed with, it's just petting between us, nothing more. I thought you were saying Mrs. Conagry, I told him.
I'm not married, he said with a sharpness to his words. I can do as I damn pleased. Those women are both emancipated, right?
I said, alright, and dropped it. Okay. I pointed at the empty holster in the room. That strap just holds your slingshot? Paul's deep breath carried more breeze than a bootlegger's truck.
Alright, Malone, he said with slurred words. I do carry a gun. But you're barking up the wrong tree. Lay off if you know what's good for you. You don't even know what my gun looks like.
I described the gun I'd found and how it matched the type gangsters were known to carry. And I don't see your gun around here, I ended. His jaw stiffened.
I keep my gun in that holster, and when I'm not at home, that holster stays on my person or in my jacket.
So where is it now, Paul?
What if I told you I lost it yesterday? How could you just prove that?
I raised an eyebrow. A weak story, Paul.
Weak or not, it's what I'm telling you. What are you going to do about it?
Just asking questions, I said to him. A detective has to cover all her leads. Paul took a heavy sigh, but in his drunken state, he didn't do much more. I moved to other questions. Okay. I pressed Paul further on what he'd already told me, but I got nothing useful from it. He let out a blustered sigh.
Will there be anything else?
And added sardonically,
Detective.
Okay. I feel like... So we know the Tin Spoon has a back exit. So that's leading me to believe, from everything I've heard, that it may have been one of the girls. And they're both close with him, so both have opportunity to grab his gun. But Ella was singing at the time of the murder. I think there was also claims that Fanny wasn't, she wasn't in the pool hole. So I think it's time to go back and talk to Mrs. Green. Mrs. Green was seated in her chair, considerably more awake than the previous day. Miss Malone, have you found anything about my husband's killer? She asked in her chair. I mumbled a greeting and sat down beside her. One of your backing singers claims you left the upstairs room before midnight, I said from my notes. That's not true, she said defiantly. I was there the entire evening. She seemed quite sure, Mrs. Green. She sang to the drunken boys without you there. I asked our doorman, Miss Malone. Says nobody left the upstairs room. You're doing your own digging, I asked. She blushed. I just have no confidence in the police. Anyhow, if nobody came from upstairs, that eliminates anyone in the pool room. I must have been in the restroom if I know certain I wasn't with them at that exact time, because I could not have been outside. There is a back door that only the female performers can use. Is that right, Mrs. Green? Oh, yes, she said. I think you're right. I stepped out at some point during the night, Mrs. Green admitted. Sometimes a girl needs fresh air, but I could not have been gone long. I was in the billiards room most of the night. So, Mrs. Green had no alibi at the time of Connor's death. I noted that and continued asking other questions. So I've got the means and the opportunity because she's got no alibi and she has the means to have grabbed Tiny Paul's gun. Motive, the only thing I can think about is Paul. So, I've had a few sources connecting you and Tiny Paul, Mr. Green. Is he your lover? Her face turned crimson. She denied my claims with just about every word in the thesaurus, but that face had told me enough. Her and Tiny Paul were having an affair, which could give her enough motive to kill her husband. I asked her again about her night. I may have stepped out for a bit of air, but I surely wasn't gone long. That bit of air still could have given her enough time to kill her husband. Okay, I have means, I have motive, I have opportunity here, Mrs. Green. I'm sorry, Miss Fanny, but I thought of accusing Fanny Green of killing her husband. Accusing someone of murder was certain to agitate them. I knew it was not something I should do lightly. They would refuse any further casual chats. But if I was confident that she had killed Connor, including knowing the means, the motivation and the opportunity for her to do so, then I knew that I should accuse her. Fanny Green, I started boldly. You killed your husband. A stillness permeated the room as I spoke my words. I can prove your means, motivation and opportunity for the murder. Fanny's face contorted, like I'd first seen her in Southern Coffee. She barked at me. What are you saying? I loved my husband dearly. How dare you accuse me of murder? She huffed her way out of breath, which gave me a chance to prove it. Okay. So means. Tiny Paul's gun is missing, and he says only someone close to him could grab it. What are you implying, Miss Malone? Just that anybody in the billiards room could have taken his gun. Miss Malone, I'd be crazy to try and take a gangster's gun. He'd have shot me with it first. I was not close to Tiny Paul. I had shown Mrs. Green that Paul's missing gun could have been the murder weapon, but I'd yet to tie her to it, and I'd yet to prove any motive or opportunity for her to kill her husband. close enough to Paul to take his gun? She screamed until she was blue. They didn't believe her denials. An affair could give her enough motivation to kill her husband, and the access to Paul's gun would give her the means. I had shown Mrs. Green that Paul's missing gun couldn't have been the murder weapon. Considering her affair with Tiny Paul, she also would have the perfect motive to kill her husband. I just needed to prove that Mrs. Green had the opportunity for murder. You've admitted to being gone for parts of the night, I told her. That could have given you the perfect opportunity to murder your husband. She huffed at that for a while, but it stuck. It was clear now. I put it to her. Mrs. Green, you're the only one of my suspects with probable motive, means, and opportunity for murder. You knew you had to leave your husband. You loved Paul, and, as often happens, you began hating Connor because of it. So you tailed him to see what he was scheming. Maybe you could sink his plans and have the mob do your dirty work. Then you met me. You learnt your husband had been receiving death threats, and you knew that was your play. If he died, police would blame it on the underground. So, last night after your singing, you called Connor to the Tin Spoon. You snuck out of the billiards room the back way, taking Paul's gun with you. That's when you shot him. She looked at me hotly, about to burst, but then she sighed and stared down at her feet. She began to cry. However many opiates were running through her blood, they had lost all their effectiveness. I put an arm around her as she wept.
Connor had made my life miserable, she said between sobs. Look around this dump. That's how ruined I am inside. Oh, that manipulative little sneak. You're right. I hated him. It's why I started going with Paul in the first place.
She balked at my surprise.
Oh no. I never loved Paul. I just wanted him to kill Connor. But after learning about Ella, she trailed off. Oh, how could I convince Paul if he loved someone else? I had no way of leaving Connor. I slumped back to misery.
What about a divorce? I offered.
Divorce?
She screamed, the word back at me.
Connor would never give me that. They say we're emancipated, sure, but we still need our husband's permission to leave his home. I was the only good thing that bum owned, and he would never let go of me. That's why I was chasing him yesterday, she continued. If I could prove infidelity, I'd demand a split in court. I got all excited when I saw you standing in your doorway.
She started breathing more heavily.
I had to follow you to make sure, but I was certain I had my out. Only it happened you were above board. You're a detective, and I was still trapped. After we met, I came home to find Connor waiting for me. He said we'd be leaving for St. Louis.
She took a gasp of air and continued.
Leaving everything I'd known for a place I'd never been, with a man I didn't love. I couldn't do it, and I told him so. And then he struck me.
She wiped away her tears, and with them came her blush and thick camouflaged power. A liver-coloured spot the size of a silver dollar showed on her cheekbone.
He just marched out the door,
she continued through her ward words,
and I didn't know what to do.
And then you thought of Paul's gun, I concluded for her.
That's right. Maybe Paul wouldn't kill Connor, but I knew he carried a cannon, and I knew I could get to it.
So you took Paul's gun and killed your husband, I said.
No, she said. No. That wasn't my plan, but...
She broke off her sentence with a sniff and started another.
I went to Paul's apartment late in the afternoon and grabbed his pistol. Then I came back here. I sat in this chair, petting the gun in my hand, wondering if I would do it. him in.
Your husband, I offered.
No, a much kinder man. Oh, he listened so well. I even told him about,
She paused.
about my plan.
This other man, you knew him? I asked. She nodded a yes.
He said he understood everything. He said he could frame the murder. He said not to worry. He took the gun. Oh, she cried, but I couldn't let him go through with it. You see, that's why I left the tin spoon last night, to stop him. That was when I met Redstone Stable.
In response to my raised eyebrows, she explained.
I only met him last night. I had no idea that he had anything to do with my husband until this morning. The police told me at the station that Connor had suspected Stable. But I knew instantly that he was a terrible man. A woman's intuition never lies. Stable talks like a snake and has the looks to match.
So you were both searching for the same person last night? I asked.
Yes, but he wasn't around, I think.
She sobbed. I'm tired of this, I said. Who is it?
It's the owner of that hat,
she said, pointing to it.
It's Franklin.
Frankie? I asked. She continued slowly.
Yes, he took the gun from me yesterday. I was too dazed to argue.
Nice story, I said. You still fit the bill just fine.
Phyllis, even if I had the gun, how would I know where to plant it? I only met Stable last night and I knew nothing about him. Franklin had known about the case from you. Isn't that right?
You're only telling this to me now, I asked. What's the big idea stringing me along?
Phyllis, she said softly, Franklin did this for me. He saved me. If that awful man Stable has to take the fall so that Franklin can stay free, well...
She trailed off. I shook my head and looked at her. If she was telling the truth, Stable could confirm it. And if she was lying, I thought, what if she ran? Well, she would get stopped soon enough. Good looks can be a curse, and it would be a cinch to snag her. Besides, with those opiates in her, she would have difficulty standing, yet alone running anywhere. I gazed at her, and she understood what I was thinking.
I'll be right here if you come back.
I wondered why she would fabricate such a story if she knew she was stuck. Then I thought, what if it was the truth? I had to speak with Frankie. All my actions from those moments blurred together. I only remember the thoughts racing through my head. As I hailed a taxi cab for Southern Coffee, I went over the facts again, trying to deny them, but they all fit too well. Frankie had been infatuated with Mrs. Green, and he could have gone to visit her. He could have taken the gun. He knew about Stable from when I told him of the case, and he could have planted it at his racetrack. Those facts might be explained away innocently, but it was the combination. Frankie was the only person with means, motivation, and opportunity to kill Green. I stepped out of the cab, hoping Frankie would give me another explanation for all of it. I walked down the creaking steps. That familiar basement smell added to the lump in my throat. I must have spent some time looking around the place, inhaling it. Eventually, my eyes fell on Frankie. He gave me his generous smile that I knew well. I pulled out the hat and showed it to him. This hat belongs to you, I said in a flat tone. Frankie gaped. If I'd any doubt, that look erased them. You killed Connor Green. Frankie's next sentence was short, delivered after a sigh. I always remembered it. I can't lie to you, he said. My jaw began to quiver, either from sadness or anger. It was hard to be sure. Why get wrapped up in this, I asked. Does that dimpled girl mean so much to you? Frankie shook his head. This'll be a long story, he started. I let him talk. As heated as I was, I had to know why Frankie would kill my client. It's that sheet. He motioned to the newspaper flopped on the bar. 1887. St. Louis Browns. My last good season. My career was ruined by Thomas Kinney. Kinney was a mob boss, you see. He ran St. Louis politics. Above, ground, below. He was cruel to everyone, sure, but he had a special hate for blacks. In 1887, that hate came to baseball. One practice, a local kid comes up to the fence and calls Murray, a left fielder, over to him. He tells Murray that every Browns player has to sign onto a letter which says that we can refuse to play against the Brooklyn Cubans, a coloured team. The kid then runs off. We all knew where the orders really come from. If I refused to ink it, Kinney's gang would run me out of baseball. Or worse, but some of our best teammates and people I'd known over the years have been black. Was torn up about it. In the end, I guess it was just the kid who wanted to play. I didn't want trouble. I signed with the others. It was the worst decision I ever made, Malone. It's haunted me since. I started on the hooch, and I never played the same again. I kept listening as Frankie continued. I became the boomtown of St. Louis in the dumps at every bar in town. But this louse had tales about old Thomas Kinney, and a way of telling them that kept the others interested. Maybe my rumours worked. Kinney lost the next election. Just a few weeks later, he died of tuberculosis. Kinney's partner, Tom Egan, blamed me for all of it. I knew I had to blow St. Louis, so I went to Philly, my hometown. I ran into my old pitching partner, Matt Kilroy, who had opened a bar. He invited me to run it with him, as long as I stopped drinking myself. Under his eye, I made it. I got sober by working in a squeaky, if you can believe that. I even married Kilroy's sister and became the stepfather to her two boys. I was engrossed and continued to listen as Frankie went on. Well, by then, Egan had renamed the gang, and Egan's rats had spread east. They came for me one night, and I barely ducked their spray. Lucky a cop was near his beat, or he would have circled around and finished the job. I had a great life in Philly, but I had to give it up. I couldn't put my new family in that danger. I fled out west, where I knew the rats didn't have a foothold. Philly was the second time those bastards ruined my life. I ended for him, and when you discovered that Green was part of Egan's rats, you wouldn't let them ruin you a third time? Frankie laughed. No. I could have run easy. My life here ain't much. I have nobody here, really. Except you. Sure, I could flee somewhere else, but it's you. Egan's rats won't leave an end loose. If Green had reached St. Louis, they'd have come back and tied you up. I can run from town to town, but I can't make you do that. I was the one who told you to take the case, remember? I had to stop them from hounding the rest of your life. I stared at him without thought or emotion, he said. I did this for you. Poetic, Frankie, I countered. But this only proves that you had no faith in me. Just like Green, who hired me because of the thought I wouldn't see through his scream. Or his wife, who was hoping I would gum up the works for the police. You thought I couldn't hold my own. I'm just some flapper playing in a man's world, is that right? Frankie shrugged. I just wanted to protect you. I can protect myself, I told him. And without any murders.
sighed. I suppose I wouldn't blame you for taking me in, he said. No, I won't fight if you want to drag me to the hall. But the police have stopped looking for a killer. If you let me, I'd keep running. It's up to you.
If a good person kills a bad person to protect everyone involved, does that make them a bad person? It was a few mornings later that I received a knock on my door. A small man in a light blue uniform asked me to sign for a package and handed me an envelope in a brown box. I opened the envelope. Inside were Frankie's scribbles, only slightly more legible than hieroglyphics. The writing was curt.
Blowing the berg, it started. Too much baggage around to keep this act going. Went back to the missus for my hat, spotted this. She agrees you should have it. Hope it serves you well. You become one hell of a detective. Good knowing you.
The final two letters were obscured by a small wet blotch on the page.
Thanks for everything, Frankie.
I put the note away, but not before a drop fell on the name Frankie, creating my own small wet blotch. I turned to the box and removed one side of the tape from the cardboard, then snapped the flaps open with a couple of loud pops. Rolled in a loose ball inside the box was Lewis's grey coat. I put it on and looked at myself in the mirror. I grabbed the lapels and put them on and pulled them tight. The trench coat suited me. I wondered how Green had first gotten hold of it. That innocent question was about to lead to a lot of trouble.
Dumb things on street. So many dumb things on street. Dumb things on street.